Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about whether or not Hammurabi's code was just. And to do that, we have to analyze the primary sources that make up Hammurabi's code, which is the whole purpose of a document-based question, which is what we are working on, is to look at the primary source documents and secondary source documents to recreate an answer to a historical question. And in this instance, our historical question is, Hammurabi's code, was it just? Well, what does just mean? Just is asking, is it justified? Is it fair? Does it make sense for the time period, in the time period's context? Does it have reasoning behind it? So today we're going to analyze documents C and D. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Document C is an excerpt from Hammurabi's Code, which comes from in 1754 BCE. Okay, and there are 282 laws in Hammurabi's Code. The numbers below refer to their order on the stele. And remember, the stele is a big 8-foot tall piece of stone that the laws were carved into so that people knew the laws that they had to follow. So today's document C has to do with family law. Law 129, if a married lady is caught in adultery with another man, they shall bind them and cast them into the water. Law 148, if a man has married a wife and a disease has seized her, if he is determined to marry a second wife, he shall marry her. He shall not divorce the wife whom the disease has seized. She shall dwell in the house they have built together, and he shall maintain her as long as she lives. Law 168, if a man has determined to disinherit his son and has declared before the judge, I cut off my son, the judge shall inquire into the son's past. And if the son has not committed a grave misdemeanor, the father shall not disinherit his son. Law 195, if a son has struck his father, his hands shall be cut off. Now, the questions that follow come with this idea of whether or not Hammurabi's code was just or not just. And again, we need to remember to look at the time period and what was necessary. We are still in document C. So number 1, in Law 129, what does it mean to bind them and cast them into the water? This simply means that he's going to tie them up or strangle them, and the person who did it, or both people that did it, and then drown them. Now, many people might think that this is not justified, but this is a society that relies on having a partnership with everybody. And if you don't or can't rely on people to be faithful or truthful with you, then you're not going to be able to survive on your own. So this, we can argue, could make it just, even though it seems really harsh. Number 2, in Law 168, what does it mean to disinherit a son? So disinherit means to cut off a family member from receiving an inheritance. An inheritance in Babylonia was often land and farm animals, and you would get this after the father had died, or once the son had come of age, so once he became an adult. And the purpose was to help them start their own lives. So disinheriting would mean like you don't get to do that. And the reason why this might be a just law is because the father can't just say, oh, I'm not going to give you your inheritance because I don't like you. The father has to have a reason. The son had to have done something terrible in order for his father to disinherit. Number 3, 2 crimes in the document result in physical punishment. What are those crimes? How might Hammurabi argue that the punishments were just? The crimes that have physical punishments are the crime of adultery, which means cheating on one's husband, and also striking one's father, so hitting a father. Hammurabi might argue that striking one's father is an attack on authority. And so if a child is able to hit his father, what is to stop them from someday hitting or attacking the king? who was the head of the entire society. And because of that, they would cut off his hand. Otherwise, it would create disorder and hurt Babylonia. So if they were to lose their king, or the possibility of losing their king, can always hurt the society as a whole. So it was better for them um, to punish severely so that it deterred other people from doing it, and that that kid wouldn't do it again. I know I wouldn't. Number 4, Hammurabi said that his code was meant to protect the weak. Is there evidence in this document that the code did so? Well, I would have to say that there's really good evidence. Law 148 protects a sick wife. So just because a husband can marry again doesn't mean that he can just like put his sick wife aside and say, oh, it doesn't matter, you're sick, so I don't care. No, he has to still take care of her and pay for her, pay for her to get better or until she dies. And then Law 168 protects the son from losing his inheritance, because a father can't just say, oh, well, I want to keep it, so you're going to be disinherited. No, he has to have a reason in order to disinherit his son. And basically, they go before a court of judges, or a jury that will determine whether or not what the son has done was bad enough to lose his inheritance. Number 5, overall, are these laws regarding family just? That is, are they fair to the accused, to the victim, to society as a whole? Guys, this is a really tough question. Losing one's life or one's hand for crimes such as these seems so harsh today, because that's not the society we live in. However, it is easy to argue that the punishment was too harsh for the crime, and that therefore the code was unjust. However, this is a time when society was always under attack. So civilizations always had the threat of being invaded or having something bad happen to them from the people that surrounded them or the communities that surrounded them. And so having harsh punishment would mean, or having strict discipline was necessary for the security of society as a whole. The strict discipline and the harsh punishment would make it so that people were able to work together and to trust each other, and to make sure that these things didn't happen from within, since they were always battling from the outside. So they needed to take care of on the inside first. So the harsh punishments may be reasonable because they allowed Babylon to survive. Also, guys, Law 148 shows compassion for a sick wife, and that seems to be very just. Let's move on to document D. So these are excerpts again from Hammurabi's code, and these have to do with property or owning things within Babylonia. Law 21, if a man has broken through the wall to rob a house, they shall put him to death and pierce him, or hang him in the hole in the wall which he has made. Law 23, if the robber is not caught, the man who has been robbed shall formally declare whatever he has lost before a god and the city, and the mayor in whose territory or district the robbery has been committed shall replace for him whatever he has lost. Law 48. If a man has borrowed money to plant his fields, and a storm has flooded his field or carried away the crop, in that year he does not have to pay his creditor. And then laws 53 and 54. If a man has opened his trench for irrigation, and the waters have flooded his neighbor's field, the man must restore the crop he has caused to be lost. Now, property laws are extremely important in Babylonia, because all these people had was what they owned. And that's all the things that they were able to use to survive from day to day, was their personal property, which usually had to do with farming. So number 1, in Law 21, what is the penalty for breaking into a home? Well, that penalty was death, followed by a piercing or hanging. And this was probably to make an example out of them, to make it so that other people didn't want to rob a home or other people's stuff. Number 2, how might Hammurabi justify the harsh punishment? Without trust and security, guys, a neighborhood and a community cannot survive. And that is extremely important in a society like Babylonia, where people from the outside of the empire or the city are always trying to attack and get in. So if you don't trust the people beside you and your neighbors, you can't survive because you're also trying to like defend the city from invasion. Well, then people stay home out of fear. Because of that, trade suffers and the government loses support. And so what they do is they cut out a cancer before it spreads. And what this means is they make an example again out of people so that that behavior doesn't spread to everybody else. And so it makes it so that nobody else wants to commit that kind of crime. So it says that Babylonia is not going to tolerate robbers. Number 3, in Law 23, if the robber is not caught, who reimburses the victim for his or her loss? The local mayor reimbursed the robbery victim, but this reimbursement probably comes from the community as a whole. So by making it so that everybody basically had to pay in a robbery, it made it so that nobody wanted to rob somebody or to take their stuff because they were going to have to pay for it anyway. 4, how might Hammurabi have justified reimbursing the victim? So he might have said that the community needs to step forward to make things better. So that's a high level of justice that says your problem is our problem and we're all in this together. And being all in it together, since they rely so heavily on their neighbor, again makes it so that nobody else really wants to rob somebody. So we're all in that together. Number 5, in Law 48, what is a creditor? Is Law 48 fair to creditors? So a creditor is somebody who lends money, like a banker today. And as to fairness, most creditors in America today would expect their interest regardless of natural disasters. So they would still expect to be paid regardless of something that has happened, especially if it's out of their control. For example, like especially during the pandemic, me and my husband owe money to the bank for our car payment. If one of us had lost our job because of the pandemic, the bank is still going to be looking for their money for that car. Okay, it doesn't matter what's happened, they're still owed that money. So one could guess that creditors in ancient Babylonia were no different and would feel that the code was unfair. After all, the disaster wasn't their fault. And number 6, overall, are these laws regarding property just? And this is an opinion question. So the death penalty for robbery seems excessive, meaning it seems a lot for the crime. However, because of the reimbursement given by Law 23 by the city to a victim from that city, that seems extremely enlightened, meaning like that seems like such a great idea. And so the law, it would make people feel like a family, like they could trust the people that live next to them to be all in it together. Also, the laws regarding crop loss seem pretty reasonable, especially since agriculture was a key to surviving in society. And the victim of flood by natural causes, or carelessness is helped. And so the careless neighbor is who pays.